Okay, so there we are. The Solar Revolutions webinar begins here. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Thanks, participants, for joining. And I'm sure this is going to be one of the most enlightening sessions, at least for me. So I hope it is useful for panelists and also participants. Thanks, Anthony, Lars, Levi, and Rok for joining me. And let's just begin with a little bit of bio for about a minute for everyone. Anthony, please.
A little biography.
Yeah.
Well, actually, astrology for me has been a hobby lifelong. I'm actually a psychiatrist, and I've practiced psychiatry all my life. I'm now retired. But I've always done some astrology on the side because it fascinates me. And my interests, I'm sort of like everything about astrology. I especially liked horary astrology. I have been very interested in solar returns, predictive astrology, less so natal astrology, because to me it seems very general. And I like the history of astrology and how the ideas developed.
Great. So Anthony has, in this context, Anthony has written a book on solar returns. It's called The Art of Forecasting Using the Solar Returns. And it's available on Amazon if you want to check out. And I'm sure it's going to be one of the most fascinating materials you'll find. I've just added it in the link. So if someone is interested, I'm sure you can just get it for yourself. So Lars, I've met Lars before 2 years, but I don't think I've met him after that. And this is the first time I'm meeting. Hello, Lars.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. And, actually, I just started studying astrology today. For those of you who don't know, I've never studied astrology before, so I don't really know what solar revolutions are. But yeah, I think it'll be fun talking about this and whatnot. And yeah, cool. No, in reality, I've been studying astrology for 8-9 years, and I've studied like many different branches: humanistic, modern, Jyotish, Hellenistic, Persian, Renaissance, Uranian, esoteric, and I don't know, maybe some other ones that I'm forgetting. But yeah, I guess my thing is that I like to use astrology as a sister science with other divinatory systems, and I attempt to just basically approach it in a very divinatory manner, in a much more right brain manner than left brain. Although you got to have both. But what I do increasingly with it is, I don't know, much more. It's much more like a painting to me, if that makes sense. It's like the way I utilize it as a sister system with other systems like tarot and omens and whatnot. So it's kind of like a big collage rather than like a hard and fast science, I guess you could say. So thanks for having me on.
Sure. So Levi?
Yes, I got into astrology in 2006. I had a reading. I didn't really start studying then. I've been into it for maybe, I don't know, I think the same time as Lars has been, 8-9 years. I mainly focus on Gemini, astrology, also solar returns, definitely. I studied psychology, but then switched over to music. I'm a drummer and composer. And at a certain point, just astrology just hit me really hard. And I think I would say I use astrology more in a healing, as a healing method. I think that's the way it comes out for me most naturally. So I'm very glad to be able to be here with all these interesting people, people I haven't met, and so I'm very curious and very willing to learn also about what they have to say about it. So thank you, Aswin, and all the rest of you.
Thank you. Rok?
Well, yeah, I've been studying, exploring astrology for the past 7 years or so. And initially I got into it due to having quite severe health problems which medical practitioners were not unable to solve. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll find some answers in astrology. And then eventually I got hooked into it and studied with Western astrology, modern Western astrology. But at that time my philosophical background was Vedanta, the Indian philosophical system. And eventually I then also got into Vedic astrology, but more the Jaimini school of astrology, same as Levi. But I was always like interested in, okay, what was there before modern Western astrology in the West? And eventually also Lars hooked me to Hellenistic astrology. We were having discussions, and then I really looked into it, and now it's forming the core of my practice, and I'm getting to know it more and more. And I'm also in parallel I'm studying Jaimini system, but I have to say that there I've kind of hit a wall, and I think that if I want to proceed I will have to learn Sanskrit, because otherwise it will be difficult.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have a question and answer tab here. If anyone has a question midway, you can just put it there, and we'll see. Not we'll see, but we'll try to make sure that we answer as much questions as possible from the participants. So that's just one update. So I think we already have a question even before starting it. So someone is asking, Lubin, what are your thoughts about using solar return in relation with annual perfection? So that is the premise where we're getting to. So we request you to kind of be patient for a few minutes, because we're almost getting there, and that's probably the first point. But before getting into that, intricacy, I think before we should kind of define solar revolution. So who's kind of willing to go for that? Defining solar revolutions or solar returns? Okay, Anthony. Okay, cool, sure.
Okay, yeah. So solar revolution is simply the most basic level of it is simply taking the transiting planets at the time when the sun returns to its exact degree that it was when a person was born. So taking those transits and then taking note of them relative to the birth chart. That's the most simple level of solar returns. And originally, right, that's what was done, is that the transiting planets were just seen on that solar birthday around the birth chart or relative to the birth chart. And then later on, astrologers started making a whole separate chart with its own ascendant and midheaven and so on out of that set of transits. And that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so Anthony, do you have something different to add to this?
No, I would basically agree with that.
Okay.
Initially, the only thing I would add is that it was the transits because they didn't have instruments precise enough to measure where the sun was, so you really couldn't tell when the sun would precisely get back to where it started.
Exactly. Great.
And so to compensate for that, they used the duration of the year. And
Sure.
they just, your birth chart added a year to it to get the next return. And they were conceived of as annual revolutions rather than solar revolutions. That is, you would study the cycle of 1 year, not just what happened with the sun, but what happened with everything else,
Sure.
and how that would forecast the year ahead.
Yeah, I think the common term that was used was revolution of years. So yeah. So Levi, do you have you practice Tajika? So I thought if you might have something new to add to this.
Oh, I think in terms of defining what a solar revolution is, I think it's quite clear.
Okay.
So I think one of the interesting things is that we're looking at the path of the sun, right, as the most stable, representing the most stable path. Of course, we can also look at revolutions of the moon, right? So if we're looking at the solar year, which is a tropical year, we're going to look at 365.2422 days. We can also look at a Varshafal in the things that I'm practicing, but looking at the lunar year, for example, which is a little shorter. So it's all possible. But no, I think in terms of defining what solar revolutions are, I think Anthony and Lars
Okay. No,
define that perfectly. Mm-hmm.
Rok, do you have something new to add? I think we had a lot of prelude conversations for the last 2 days, but if you have something to add to this, I think I basically agree with everything. And if you want,
maybe just conceptually, why? I mean, Levi already started with the importance of the sun, but why would it be so important to note the positions of the planets when the sun returns to its natal position? Why would that be so important? Why not the moon or any other planet?
Mm-hmm.
The sun is, at least from a tropical perspective, the whole zodiac is based on the movement of the sun, and the sun also basically in all traditions represents the spirit, the consciousness. So it's the solar return, at least I see it like that. It's sort of like a snapshot of what consciousness will experience in that coming year.
Great. So
I would also add that it's like a clock, it's like a clock. You're looking at the clock and then you say, okay, this is what is on the menu for this year.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say.
Right.
So I think as Anthony pointed out, in those days, it was might have been very difficult to kind of note down the exact position of the planets, and it was also basically difficult to kind of reach out to an astrologer in the ancient times. So sun's movement is associated with a year, and solar revolution turned out to be an annual prediction method basically, and it also kind of made way to be useful for people to kind of approach an astrologer not regularly but over a period of time, which could be a year. And today we see so many astrologers giving annual prediction consultations in their websites. So that could have been a basic motivation behind this idea of bringing a revolution, and sun particularly because it covers a specific period of time, which is 1 year. So I think so. Does anyone know when it really started? I think it is the Hellenistic tradition, and as far as I know, solar revolutions was present in Dorotheus of Sidon. He's the earliest author that we have, and then came Valence. So is there anyone who kind of has a different opinion? And if someone knows any other astrologer has written about it, even material that is actually predating Dorotheus?
I'm not aware of.
I'm not aware either, but for example, in Vedic astrology, you have, like in Tajika, which is something that is given in Nilakanti, is that is the Muda Dasha. I talked with it previously with Rok. See, Muda Dasha is a Nakshatra Dasha, right? It's a Vimshatri-like type of Dasha. But the old texts, the Hindu texts, don't really mention solar returns, right? There they use the Dasha system and so on. So it's not really focused on that, but Muda is there, right? So it has to have some origin, maybe in ancient past. The old Hindus had their tradition of using solar returns. Who knows? But we just can't go back, it seems, that far.
I think the problem here is that we're kind of discussing about the oral tradition, as Anthony initiated, that we don't have, materials from that era, because Vedic land always believed and practiced oral tradition of astrology. and we might have actually lost a lot of techniques and philosophical and conceptual basis of astrological techniques long back. But as far as we have now, I think I think the best place is to begin with Dorotheus' method. So Rok. So I think what we use is pretty much Dorotheus' method, because I use Benjamin Knight's Dorotheus of Sidon, the Carmen Astrologicum. So if you want to find a really good material on solar returns, I think it's the fourth book, Revolutions, Illness, Death, and Transits. So even the title pretty much makes it clear that transit plays a very important role in terms of using this particular technique itself. So I think first point is ascendant, but still I would start with sun. So everywhere in all the text, one commonality is that sun's entry to the natal point, the exact natal degree marks the solar return chart of that particular individual for that particular year. So that is pretty much clear, and all the positions of all the other planets, I think. So all the positions of all the other planets remain the same, in relation to Sun's position at that particular time during the transit. So I think we have differential opinions in terms of fixing the ascendant. So I think, Rok, you can just begin by.
Yes, I mean, just a few months ago we had a discussion on Planet Dance Facebook group, the group for Planet Dance software, and the question was, what was the correct understanding of valence style solar return? Because it appears that valence somehow wants to merge both solar and lunar returns together. He doesn't take the ascendant of the solar return as the ascendant, but wants us to look at, when the moon returns to its natal position, and take that ascendant as the ascendant of the solar return chart, which is an interesting idea. But also, when you think of it, the chart is it's a synthetic chart. It doesn't, in reality, it doesn't exist. So he basically merges two moments in time together into one chart. And there were many, different opinions how is it done correctly, but as far as I understand, this is the way. He would look at the return of the sun, note all the planetary positions down, then look at when the moon returns to its position during the time the sun is in its natal sign, and then take the ascendant of the time of the lunar return as the ascendant of the chart, which is very unique. I haven't found this anywhere else. But it's interesting that valence already, seems to create a chart, a separate, dedicated solar return chart with the ascendant, while Dorotheus doesn't. He doesn't mention the ascendant. He basically just uses the solar return positions of planets as transits, and this is something that I've prepared today just as an example to show this earliest simple method of solar return, and that although it is simple and early, you could say primitive form of it, it's actually very effective. So this would also maybe answer the question we got in the chat. Yeah. What are your thoughts about using solar return chart in relation with annual perfection? Because, yes, that's the important part of it.
Okay, so the issue that I have with valence's technique in terms of practicing is, I think it is my own limitation, but valence also takes moon's position into consideration. But is there a case where sun might actually move into the other sign when?
Yeah. So that's its problem. Yeah, I mean, if you have the sun at the very last degrees, there's a great chance that the moon won't reach its natal degree.
Yeah.
In some cases.
So that is the philosophical problem that I have with valence. So Anthony wants to say something.
Well, as I understand valence, what he did was he took the day that the sun returned to its natal position. He didn't know the exact position of the sun, but he put the planets around the natal chart. And then for an ascendant, he would look at when the moon returned to its degree within that sign of the sun, within the zodiacal sign of the sun. So it wasn't necessarily that lunar return after the sun. It was the moon had to return to its position sometime while the sun was in the same sign as the birth sign.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
yeah, that's
Rok.
exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Rok, can you also clarify something on what you spoke with 7 Stars Astrology, Anthony of 7 Stars Astrology yesterday? I think it would be a great platform for you to share it here.
Yeah, I mean, at least the translation done by Pingree of Dorotheus, it's kind of a little bit unclear when it comes to this chapter, because if you don't pay attention that Dorotheus only perfects the ascendant and no other point, it might lead you to believe that the whole chapter is basically talking more about the perfections, like planets transmitting to other planets or arriving to other planets by perfection than by transit of the solar return. So yeah, I'm grateful to Anthony that finally, this has become clear to me that yes, indeed, he is dealing with solar returns.
So okay, so where do you exactly fix the ascendant at this point, or do you even don't bother about the ascendant?
No, you don't. Dorotheus doesn't.
Okay, so
he just notes the planets down at the time of the solar return, and that's about it. And basically looks as a transit chart.
Okay, Lars, you want to say something? You were kind of.
One
moment. I think. Something.
I do, but I think what I'll have to say will be kind of off topic, semi off topic. So I don't know.
Okay, so Anthony wanted to say something. So.
My thought was you can only measure with the instruments they had. They could only measure the sun within several minutes of arc. And each minute of arc is about 24 minutes on the clock. So if you're several minutes off, it could be hours in either direction. So you really couldn't know the ascendant. It could be several signs before or after what you thought it was.
Okay. So, okay, one moment. We'll just, before moving into professions, we'll just find out if someone has some questions. Ascendant or any other basic stuff. Okay, seems there's nothing. Okay, so perfection seems to be one of the most commonly agreed thing that is found in Dorotheus and also Valence's material. So let's begin with how to use perfected Lord and the perfected sign with respect to the solar return chart, which is called as a recasting chart by Pingree. And so who wants to go for it? I think it's open now.
I'll start if
okay.
That's
good, cool.
Okay, so basically, as I understand it, at least from Valens, I haven't read the Dorotheus chapter, or if I have, I haven't really looked at it very closely. But perfections is sort of perhaps the most simple method of prediction like ever created, because we're just moving one sign. We're moving everything one sign per year if we want, but we may focus on like the ascendant or the moon. I try to look at them both because I found the moon is really revealing as well for perfections. But in any case, in relationship to solar returns, like you almost can't, I mean, you can use perfections without solar return transits, but you almost can't, because with just perfections, right? We're only dealing with what's in the chart, right? So perfections repeat verbatim every 12 years, and so like you're not gonna see the same exact things happening every 12 years for the person. It's just not going to happen. There might be some key similarities, like, oh, this year is like a career advancement year for you, or this year is a year where you'll generally have some trouble with your job, right? But there's a major difference between like in 1 year, a person like being fired and like losing everything, and then 12 years later being in a different job and having maybe some challenges with some coworkers, but those challenges don't ultimately lead to their forced resignation, so to speak, right? So we can have things like that. So what solar returns do is, by taking the perfection in relationship to the solar return transits, right, we can basically start to fine tune the types of experiences, mental states, and thus events that a person is likely to encounter during that year. So the simplest way is to look at the perfected ascendant, let's say, and then, putting the solar return transits around the birth chart and seeing if any of those transits fall in the sign of the perfected ascendant for that year. Because then those planets become actually very important for that year, especially if there's no planets naturally in that sign in the birth chart by itself, right? Valens himself seems to suggest that a transiting solar return planet in the perfected ascendant, especially when it doesn't have any planets in it natally, is more important than the lord of that sign in the birth chart. So basically, that's kind of the first step, right? And then you can analyze things like you would normally. Like you can analyze like what condition is that transiting planet in, and so on. You can analyze the solar return transits relative to their natal positions. Are they in squares? Are they in trines? Are they bonifying or afflicting other natal planets, that they normally wouldn't? Because that's all going to give us details about the story that's going to unfold that year. But then to get a little bit more complex, right, you can also look at what planets are in the stakes or the angles from that perfected ascendant, right? If there's no transiting solar return planets in that perfected ascendant, you can say, well, is there anything in the 10th or the 7th or the 4th, right? And then you can look at those too. But it's easy to get carried away, right? So you kind of, with normal perfections, you start with the lord of the perfected sign and look at its position in the natal chart with like the most simple methodology. But then we also can look at, well, but what is that perfected lord of the year doing as a solar return transit, and how is it interacting with both the natal planets and the transiting planets? And then again, are there any planets in the perfected ascendant or perfected moon sign or whatever you want to look at for that year? And then you can do that for any topic you want. You can take any house, right? You can take the 10th house for career and advancement. You can take the 9th house for journeys and pilgrimage and religion. You can take the 12th house for like sacrifice and expenditures and falling apart and things like that. So you can look at, so you can really, I mean, and we're not even talking about casting a separate chart for the solar return, right? Like, so just with this most simple method, you can spend hours and hours and hours studying it. So that's where I'm going to stop talking and let somebody else pick up from there. Aswin, I think you're muted.
So let's quickly go to Levi and ask how things work in Tajika, and we are now traveling 16 centuries away from Valens. So, and we'll quickly get back to medieval period and ask how it.
Yes. Well, I have to say I'm not really familiar. I mean, the perfections are in Tajika are called the Mutaha, right? So I'm not really familiar too much with the Hellenistic approach here. But I was thinking maybe I can share a chart or something to make it a little more practical
Yeah, sure. But do you think we can? Sorry.
Yeah, so it's like the progressed lagna, right? The mutaha.
Exactly, that's the Munda Lord. The Mundapati acts as the profected Lord, but in Tajika, the special status, as Levi has already done a few videos on how to use Munda on his YouTube channel. I'll share the link to his YouTube channel in some time. But Munda Lord seems to be the Lord of the year, or the profected Lord, which is with respect to the Hellenistic profected Lord. But one difference in Tajika is that we give a special status to Munda Lord, and we consider Munda Lord as a specific planet itself, almost like a specific planet. So if the point Munda point is the ascendant point, which kind of perfects every 30 degrees every year, and then let's say a person is running through his 31st year of age, and his Munda Lord will be placed in the 8th house, and if the Munda Lord gets in contact with natural malefics like Saturn or Mars or the nodes, either through the transit chart, but it makes even more impact if the Munda Lord kind of connects some kind of natural malefic with the in the natal chart, and there will be challenges. And if in case, let's say, a Munda Lord is aspected, the Munda position of Munda point is aspected by a benefic planet, the challenges are a lot mitigated. So that's how kind of things are perceived in Tajika. But Levi will share an example in some time. But before that, let's ask Anthony. Sorry, yeah.
I think also, see, the Mutta is the thing that connects the Varshafal to the natal chart, right? Because we're looking at a transit, and so the Mutaha would be, I consider that point to be like a self factor. So it's going to be a very important point in Tajika, Nilakanta. It's the Varshapati, which is the year lord, and the Mutaha lord are two important points, and which I consider as like self factors. So,
and do you mean Varshapati is the lord of the ascendant for that particular year?
The Varshapati is one of the important. It's actually calculated out of
the 5 determinants. Okay, sorry. Yeah, the 5 determinants. I don't use the 5 determinants, and I just directly use Mundapati and the perfected Lord. So here I mix both Hellenistic.
Yes, but the thing is also what I heard about from Lars is that very similar, because it's coming from these traditions, is that when you look at the Mutaha or the perfected, that sign, whenever you have cruel planets falling in that sign in the natal chart, and the Mutaha is in a bad house position, so which is the 6th, 8th, or 12th, then it can indicate some problems. Okay, but of course you're going to have to look at other factors as well, like how auspicious or inauspicious that planet is. If that planet is aspected by friends, right, who are in great shape, then it's of course going to help out these things. But basically it's the thing that connects the natal and the Varshafal.
Okay, so Anthony, Abu Mashar, so I think we all agree on Sun's position, and let's not even talk about the ascendant. But in Hellenistic tradition, we seem to use perfection as a major timing technique, along with the natal chart and the solar return chart. And in Tajika, we use the Mudda Dasa is there, but Vedic astrologers are predominantly open to Vimshotri Dasha as a major timing technique, and they kind of correspond the natal and work with both natal and solar return positions. But is Firdarya the major time technique in the medieval period after
No.
8th century or so, after Theophilus?
No, in fact, perfections are the major timing method in Abu Mashar in the Persian Arabic medieval tradition.
Sure. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So the basic working method is similar to what Hellenistic and Tajika works, because
it's very Hellenistic, and I think the Persian tradition went to India and really influenced how solar returns were done in the Vedic tradition.
Okay, cool. Okay, Levi, I think you can just go ahead and share your screen at this point.
Me?
No, Levi, we'll get back to you.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
All right. So you want me to just go over my example chart?
Yeah,
That way.
sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And everyone is open to kind of point out some specific placement or something like that, because this is more of a discussion where we kind of, so there is no.
Can you see? Everybody see the chart? All right.
Yeah, we all see.
Yeah.
So participants, please, do you see the chart?
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we're looking at a woman's horoscope who gave birth when she was 29 years old. And so, there's many things that we can say looking at. Now, first of all, how I use Varshafal is more as like a confirmation technique, because I think, Parashara's style of astrology is so vast, and it deals so much with the subjective, that in terms of studying the natal scope, I use these techniques. And of course, in Tajika Nilakanti, you see a lot of crossover, right? Because it is, it was written by a Hindu, by a Hindu. So what I like to do is just, look at what is given by the Munta and the Varshapati lords, which are the two main focal points, most important points to consider. The Munta is here the perfected ascendant, which in that year fell in the sign of Libra, and which is the 5th house from the ascendant. Okay, so then you also have the Varshapati, which is the year lord Mercury, right? Which is the Varshapati is determined from looking at 5 candidates here. We can look at the Rashi Lord from the natal horoscope, the Janma Lagna, then also from the Varshapati Lagna, and so on. So the one that aspects the ascendant the strongest, right? Because here we use actual aspects is going to be the determining planet. So here in this case it was Mercury. We see that Mercury is giving its strong aspect here. So I know there's different opinions about using these specific aspectual values, but I see in practice often it helps me out a big time. We see the Munta is Libra, so the 5th house. We have the Varshapati and Mercury in there as well. So this is, already showing a lot of emphasis to 5th house affairs. And I think that's one of the things that I think is amazing in this system, is that it can sometimes just really give you this clear picture, like really showing it almost immediately. And sometimes it's not. So it can also lack a little bit of consistency. But then if we look further, it's going to be very clear if we include Shahams and so on, that this birth child is indicated. So
one moment, Levi.
Yes.
Shahams, can you just tell us what is Shahams? Because not many of them are familiar with Tajika here. Maybe if you can tell what is it?
Yeah. So these are sensitive mathematical points. Tajika Nilakanti describes about 50, and which show certain specific areas in a person's life. So, for example, in this horoscope, we're going to have to look at the Prashava Shaham, which is then translated as the delivery of a child Shaham. Okay, so it's looking at the longitudes of specific planets, and then adding that or subtracting them depending on the condition, and adding that to the ascendant degree, and so on. So, so it's a sensitive point which can reveal a lot in terms of what is actually being manifested in that year. So here we see the Prashava Shaham. I'll just put it up, which is important in the delivery of a child, which is Aquarius. So Aquarius is going to be important, and the Lord of Aquarius in how it connects to the Ascendant Lord, the Munta Lord, and the Varshapati Lord, right? And
sorry,
how strong they.
One question I have is this Saham, how is it being calculated? Because normally in Hellenistic tradition, the lot of children, I don't know if it's the same thing, is calculated.
Pretty much close to, like, it's similar to, not, I don't know if the calculation is necessarily similar to the lot calculation, but it's something, it is the lots of,
it's
It's a different
It's actually
one.
Jupiter and Mercury, and then the Lagna. Right here, if you look at the difference between these two, it's 90 degrees. So if you subtract that from the ascendant, you're going to arrive at Aquarius.
Okay, cool. I usually take it as Jupiter to Saturn. That's the way I've learned it. So that's why I was curious about how it was. Cool.
There's also another Shaham, which is connecting more to progeny, which is also very strongly active in this case. So that would be Aries, right? Which has a different calculation. But let's focus on the delivery of the child. That here in Tajika, they use Prashava Shaham, which is this specific calculation. And now see, so the fact that, we have the Munta in the 5th, right? And then also the Varshapati and Mercury in the 5th, that's already, showing like a lot of potential. Now, if you look at this horoscope and if you look at the Panchavargiya Balas and the Dwadashavargiya Balas, Panchavargiya Bala is like similar to Vimshopaka, right? Like looking at the prominence of a planet, like how strong a planet is going to be in that year. And we see that Mercury as the Varshapati Lord is quite decent. We have the Munta Lord Venus is doing okay. It's not really too strong here. But we look at these Dwadasha Vargiya Balas, which is, showing the auspiciousness of the planet, right? This is looking at the position of the planet in several Vargas and then determining the auspiciousness. And this is all, of course, based on Tajika aspects.
Sure.
But we see that Mercury is super inauspicious, right? It has in 12 Vargas, it's in a negative dignity. Venus as the Lord of the 5th here, and also the Lord of the Munta is also quite inauspicious here, with being 3, being positive in 3 Vargas and 8 in negative. So now, if purely seeing the fact that a child is coming, if you look at the Prashava Shaham, we see that the moon transits that point, and the moon is always going to be important and revealing, right? And we see that the moon is the most prominent planet in this horoscope, and it has a good strength, right? It has a good Dwadasha Vargiya, so it's quite auspicious, and it's transiting that Prashava Shaham, so connected to children.
And Prashava means directly it relates to delivery of a baby. So
the delivery of the baby, and we see that the Lord of that, Saturn, is in an aspect to the Varshapati Lord and also the Ascendant Lord here. So this is a strong indication. And we see that in the natal, I'm not going to pull up the chart here, the natal position, but in fact, Saturn was, she was having a Saturn return at that point, right? She was 29 years old. So Saturn was within 2 degrees of this, Prashava Shaham Lord, which is quite important. Now, we also see that what we want to connect is we want to connect these points, these sensitive points, as I mentioned, like the Shahams being these sensitive points. We want to connect them to the Ascendant Lord. We want to connect them to the Ascendant here, right? That point is connecting to the Ascendant. This is the Tajika aspect, right? There's also a connection to the Lord of it. It's also the Varshapati Lord, and then Venus is also aspect, and there's a square between Venus and the Prashava Shaham Lord. Okay, and also the progeny Shaham, which is another indication, as I mentioned, is also Aries, so it's also connecting to that. Then we have also Jupiter as a natural indicator of children in aspect to these points as well, right? All connecting here to the 5th house. So yeah, that would be, and then now it looks quite inauspicious. So I asked this woman if there was complications during the birth, right? Because it looks like a very inauspicious chart, right? We have 3 debilitated planets: Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. If you look at the auspiciousness of these planets, Mercury being really trashed, Saturn as the Prashavashaham also being very trashed. So what's going on here, right? So what is the saving grace here, right? And then we see that the moon, of course, is helping out here with some auspiciousness and some prominence, occupying that Shaham, and also being the lord, of course, of the fifth, and the disposer of, the Prashavashaham, lord. We see also that the munta, right, is one of these points, is that whenever the munta is aspected by its lord, it can help, right? Here we have Venus is actually helping quite a bit, right? Because this chart looks quite, on first sight, when you look at these points, these important lords, they really look afflicted, and there was affliction too, right? There was a, it was a very difficult birth. It lasted up to 40 hours. There was surgery involved. The child had to be taken away for 2 weeks, to been taken care of. There was a bacteria that was, transmitted, and so on. So it was a very difficult delivery. But we also see that, we have the moon aspecting, trying that mutta, right? That munta, or the mutaha, which is important. So we're going to have this auspicious moon, strong moon and auspicious moon with the strongest aspect to the mutaha, which is an important thing. So we also have some benefic aspects, right? Mercury is aspecting, Jupiter is aspecting, and Venus are quite nicely aspecting compared to the malefic, cruel planets, Saturn and Mars. So there's more auspiciousness to this mutaha than malefic influence, which is also something that is very important, especially here in this case. Now we see that most of these planets, right, this chart, this Varshafal chart, shows most planets in Phanephara houses, right, succeedent houses. We have, the second, the fifth, the eighth, and the 11th house occupied by, what is it here, 3, 4, 5 of the planets. We also have a planet in an angle here. And there's then the moon in the 9th, which is a cadent house. So one of these yogas that are given is also that whenever, these planets, the Varshafal chart, fall in Phanephara houses or in the angles, that it can give favorable effects. So this is, so the house positions are going to be very important as well. House positions are going to show how readily and easily a planet can deliver. Okay, and then of course the Dwasha Vargya Bala, which is the inauspiciousness and auspiciousness of a planet, is going to be important as well. And it looks quite dramatic or problematic, and it was. But if you then consider some other factors, there's some mitigating factors as well, which is showing by.
Hey, Levi, yeah, I just wanted to say, this may be rather controversial, but like, I would say, just based off of, like my own understanding of this chart on just really basic levels, I really don't know how these auspicious and inauspicious points work. But I would say that if it weren't for modern medicine, I would have looked at this and expected the child to not have survived, and the mother to potentially not have survived either. Like, that would have been, yeah. And so that's the other thing, is like, with predicting in the modern day using this stuff, modern medicine, which is a very Rahu thing, and we do have Rahu with the ascendant lord, in the fifth, Rahu kind of throws a cog into the machine of prediction and says, like, well, it's not necessarily going to work out the way you think it will. And to me, that's what modern medicine does much of the time. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Also it looks like a very problematic chart, but if you look at, it's always important to look at the natal chart, of course, right? There you have, Mercury there is really good. It's in exaltation. It's in a very good condition. It's in, it's in the sign of Virgo, exalted. Jupiter is trining that point. Sure. Mars is in Scorpio in the natal position. So Mars is also trying its own position there. So there's some stuff that is
mitigating from the natal chart. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense then, because this alone, I'm like, ooh, that's really bad. But yeah, like the big thing for those watching, like the big thing that a lot of these texts say is that the solar return cannot override the indications promised in the nativity. So if the solar return shows like this, like really gruesome kind of scenario like we're seeing here, but the nativity doesn't show that, and especially doesn't show it that year, then you need to temper your analysis with that information.
Exactly. Also, if you look at the fifth lord, Venus, it's with Mars, debilitated Mars. It's squared by Saturn here.
Yeah,
Saturn
that's
is
really, and Jupiter, the Karaka of children, is in the 8th and debilitated and retrograde. And its lord is also debilitated with K2. I mean, that's really like one of the weakest things I've ever seen. Like,
yes, but at the same time, you also see that these Panafra houses are being active. These are considered favorable houses from the Tajika angle. We also have the Varshapati. The Munta is in the 5th house, which is one of the positions.
It's a very favorable thing.
It's not really favorable. We want like the 9th, 10th, or 11th are really favorable.
Sorry.
So the Munta in the 9th, 10th, or 11th are considered really favorable. So the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th are considered like average. Like you're gonna have to be, it's gonna show more effort. That's also one of the things like Tajika Nilakanti. There's so many as a system. It's great because it provides a whole system, but there's a lot of crossover, and there's a lot of concepts that are kind of
because 5th house is I don't consider. I know like there are specific like houses where Munda Pati or Munda point actually excels, and it differs from a regular logic of the the point from the ascendant or the non-aversion point from the ascendant. So I stick to the regular stuff here. But what is impressive in terms of what you said is you use Tajika aspects, which so many Vedic astrologers kind of refrain to do so, and they just stick to regular Vedic aspects like 5, 7, 9 for Jupiter, 3, 7, 10 for Saturn, and 4, 7, 8 for Mars. 8 obviously is controversial. I know what Lars is going to say for that, but
yes.
Yes. So it's. From the outset, I think this chart, as Lars said, it's super challenging. But I think.
Yeah, I just want to say something about that. I think Moon is a saving grace here because Moon is in the 9th house, right? Which is always in Vedic astrology is the 5th from the 5th house. And if you really if you check Gemini and Gemini Rashi dashas and childbirth, 9th house is so important. And Moon is auspicious. It's the most prominent planet in the chart. It's in the 9th house.
Is this a woman's chart?
Yeah, this is a woman's chart, and it's aspecting that Munta, with strong, like 40 out of 44 points out of 60, which is important. And it's also, it's trining that. So I think it's very much helping. And then, of course, considering the natal positions and what planets are doing there, Mercury as a Varshapati lord being very strong. She has, in fact, a Taurus ascendant in the natal chart. So it was connected to, it was highlighting also 6th house affairs and so on. The worst was avoided. All right. So, and also we see that, I'm just going to go, I just made some notes here. There's a lot of stuff.
Rok, do you want to add something in the meanwhile?
When we look at the Varshapati, these houses that are important, where the year lord is strong, is connected to, is the Lagna, right? The 10th house, the 7th, the 4th, the 11th, the 5th. And so if you look at the house positions of these planets, it's all quite favorable. We have the Varshapati in the 5th house, which is fine, right? It's not the best position, but it's not like the worst. We have the Munta in the 5th, which is, let's say, average. We have the Munta Lord, Venus is in the 2nd house, which is not considered really favorable. So, it was a difficult birth, but the child lived, and the child is also healthy. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you look at, Patyayini dashas and the several, I don't know if you want to go into that, or if people want to add something, please feel free. I think
Okay, so Levi, I think we'll get back to Anthony at this point because we have spent enough time on this, and we'll get back to it later, and we'll see what you have to say on other things. So, in terms of how Tajika is seen from regular modern Vedic astrologers, how they practice, I think you are practicing it in a more traditional and the more Nilakanta way, as K.S. Charak kind of gave it in his book, which is one of the most important, Tajika materials available. So, Anthony, I think we should go. Or before that, Lars, do you have something to share? No, okay. So let's go to Anthony and ask if I think he'll give some Abu Mashar stuff for us.
Okay. I'm sorry I got called away. Someone came to the door and I had to go answer it.
No problem.
I don't think I'll be interrupted now. So you had told me yesterday to prepare a chart, so I quickly went through my slides and my charts and found prepared some slides. So let me go to that. Let's see, I'm going to share the screen. And well, let me start by the Abu Mashar. Ben Dykes has this book, which is quite good, where he translates Abu Mashar's on the revolution of the years. And this is sort of my starting point for the slides that I made. Okay, do you know this book? It's very good. Actually, it's one of the best books on solar returns you can get. Okay, so let me share the screen. Let's see, how do I share the screen here? Share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. And so let me go through this quickly. Abu Mashar actually has 19 significators of the year, which he orders in importance to look at. And I'm going to look at, since I'm not going to go through 19, 7 of them with a specific chart. First and most important is the perfected ascendant and its ruler. That was a question someone had. Next is the distribution, which is the term in which the directed ascendant falls and its ruler. And then any planet that participates with or sends an aspect to the directed ascendant is third. The Ferdaria are fourth. That was a question. That was one of your questions. The Ferdaria come in fourth. The Lord of the Orb, which is not well known in the English literature. It's more talked about in, I find it in the Spanish and Italian literature. The ascendant of the solar return comes in sixth, and the moon is seventh, and then he goes through a host of other things. Okay, any questions on this slide? So this is the order of importance Abu Mashar gives to analyzing the chart. The chart I'm going to look at, you may or may not know this guy, Felix Rodriguez. He was a French and Spanish naturalist and television personality. He went to Alaska in 1980 to cover the Iditarod dog race and ended up dying in a plane crash. And I remember this on the news. It was quite dramatic. And what's quite unique is he died on his birthday. So he died the first day of his solar return when he was 52 years old. So I thought that would be a good chart to look at because he turns 52 and a few hours later he's dead in a plane crash. This is his natal chart. Let me see if I can move this. He was born in Burgos, Spain, March 14th, 1928. And as I forget who said it, the principle is nothing will happen in a solar return if it isn't first promised in the birth chart. So we have to see, is there a plane accident, air travel accident possible in this birth chart? He has Cancer rising, so his ascendant ruler is the moon. Interestingly, the moon is conjunct Saturn, and both of these square the sun in the 9th house, which could indicate death in an accident. Why not? In a plane accident, 9th house is long distance travel, air travel. Mars, I've used Placidus houses here for the quadrant system. Mars is right on the cusp of the ninth house, of the eighth house, which could indicate a violent death. And anything else? Perfection. So we start with the perfected ascendant. He's 52, so his perfection falls in Scorpio. An easy way to do that is all multiples of 12 go in the first house, for those who aren't familiar with perfections. So 48 would be Cancer, 49, 50, 51, 52 takes us to Scorpio. Okay. Here's a wheel that makes it easy. If you know your age, he's 52. It's his fifth whole sign from the ascendant. The distributions, we want to know, here's the ascendant. What part of the chart will rise to the ascendant when he's 52 years old? It turns out, I did the calculation here. Well, I did it two ways, but I used 1 degree for a year equals 1 year of life on the midheaven. And that gives us, at age 52 in 1980, he is in the Mercury, the very first term of Virgo. I'm using the tropical ascendant with the Egyptian terms here. And the most recent aspect to this was an opposition from Mercury, which is right across the wheel. So Mercury's doubly emphasized as both the distributor, the planet that rules the term, and it's the planet that's aspecting the term that will rise to the ascendant when he's 52. And I think the next chart, what I did here was I sort of calculated a primary directed chart to age 52, and you can see that Mercury has come to the ascendant, and the term of Mercury has come to the ascendant. The first term in Virgo has come to the ascendant, and the planet Mercury is opposing that term. So Mercury becomes very important in analyzing the solar return. So to recap, we have Mars, the Lord of the year, very important, and Mercury as the distributor, very important. Okay. Natal Mercury also opposes Neptune. Yeah, that's probably significant if you use the modern planets. And that could indicate a travel accident. Mercury has a lot to do with travel, flight. He was a messenger of the gods who flew through the skies, opposing Neptune, and this opposition becomes prominent at age 52. The Ferdaria was the fourth point. At age 52, he's in his Jupiter Ferdar. Jupiter rules both the main period and the sub-period, because he's in a pure Jupiter period when he dies. And in the solar return, as we'll see, Jupiter lies in the Mercury bound, that first term bound of Virgo, and it's right at the cusp of the Placidus eighth house. Next slide. So here's what I'm talking about. This is the solar return for his birthplace. Jupiter, which is the Ferdar Lord, is right at the cusp of the eighth house. Mars, which is the Lord of the perfected ascendant, is also at the cusp of the eighth house, about to enter it. Mars is conjunct the moon's nodes, which is quite significant, I think. And what's Mercury doing here? Mercury doesn't seem to be doing too much problematic in the solar return that I can see. The Lord of the Orb. Are you familiar with the Lord of the Orb? This is his fifth technique. The Lord of the Orb, basically you take the planetary hour of your birth and you perfect that in the Chaldean order. So when he was born, Venus was his planetary hour that rules his first year of life. The Spanish, I had this in Spanish, and I'm going to give a talk in Spain next month. So I just modified the slide, but I think you can follow it. Venus, Mercury, Sun, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun is the order. Venus, the first year of life, Mercury, the second year of life, age 1, Moon, the third year of life, age 2, And I did this in an Excel spreadsheet so that we can see that by the time he's 52, Saturn, whoops, go back. Sorry about that. Saturn is his lord of the orb, and that cooperates with his perfection, Scorpio, Mars. So this year he's got his perfected lord Mars, one of the major malefics. Participating with Mars is Saturn as lord of the orb or lord of the hour, planetary hour. So he's got the two malefics cooperating with each other to color this year. Let's see. His solar return ascendant was the sixth factor to look at. That's Saturn, because he has Capricorn rising. Saturn, of course, is retrograde, debilitated in the 8th house. And it's pretty much exactly opposite his sun. And then the moon was the seventh thing I was going to look at. The moon in his, what I did was, this is his natal chart in the center and the solar return planets around it. The moon in the solar return is in the 8th house of death. What else do I want to say? The natal moon is conjunct the Neptune, and the moon-Neptune conjunction here is square the sun in the 9th house. So I think that's what I wanted to say about this chart. I mean, any questions or comments? Oh, wait.
Okay, we'll see.
I relocated the chart to, no, this is the solar return chart, the natal planets outside. So I just reversed the order.
Okay.
And you can see here, when you do that, we get the Mars-Neptune right on the 8th cusp in the Jupiter. And then I relocated the solar return to Alaska to see how that looked. And so this is the relocated Alaska chart, solar return in the middle, with the natal planets outside. And interesting, Uranus, his Uranus MC conjunction natally falls right on the 8th cusp of the Alaska solar return. And the Saturn is quite prominent here, opposing the sun from the 1st to the 7th in an angular house. So I think there are a number of indications showing we could expect a possible plane crash and death this year.
Okay.
So this is where I'm speaking in June, little self-promotion. So I'll be talking about solar returns at this conference next month.
So if someone is in Spain, I think you should just go and check out Anthony's lecture there.
So let's see. How do I get out of stop sharing? Okay. Or should I leave this on if there are questions?
Yeah, we'll see if someone has some questions about that chart, and for a minute or two, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So
okay. So any questions? This is the natal chart.
So I've not been following Facebook Live, but I don't know if someone is watching there.
No questions or comments? Okay, so I'll stop sharing.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay, Rok, did you want to add something to that chart?
To this chart?
Yeah, to what?
Well, it was just, it was interesting to see that Anthony has reversed, the two charts in one case. Yeah. And he has put the solar return in the middle and the
we have Maria,
the natal chart outside. So that's the first time I saw something like that.
We'll promote. Okay, someone is there with a question, so we'll promote them as a panelist and let them ask a question here. So if I promoted them to panelist. Okay. Okay, hi, hello, Maria. I think you can just, we are unable to hear you, please. Go ahead with your question, please. So someone else has also said, thank you, Anthony, great for comparison, compare. Okay, we need the natal chart for compare, very important. I was confused by the reversal of the chart. Okay, sure. We'll just have Anthony explain it a bit more to see how the reversal actually works.
The idea is that you must, to interpret a solar return, you must always compare the natal chart and the solar return chart. So I always do both. I put the natal chart in the center and the solar return planets around it. But then I look at the solar return and put the natal planets around it to see what connections there are in that way.
So in terms of houses, right?
In terms of houses, yeah. Houses and where the angles fall, yeah. Like when we did that, the 8th house was prominent both ways. The 8th house, especially the cusp of the 8th house. I've used the Placidus system, the solar returns, in addition to whole signs.
Okay, Anthony, could you please also talk something about the reversal of the chart?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Reversal of the chart. Maria has asked, like she said that she was a bit confused by reversal of the chart. So I think not many people are used to that.
Oh, it's just a way of comparing the two charts. I mean, I think in the Vedic chart we just did, you did the same thing. You thought about where the natal planets affect the solar return and where the solar return planets affect the natal chart. But you're doing that mentally. I just did it visually.
Okay.
Exactly.
Actually, I lost for a moment or two, and I didn't follow what you said.
Oh, you didn't hear me?
In terms of reversal, which prompted me again to ask you. So
it's important always to compare the two charts. The solar return should never be interpreted in isolation. It only makes sense with reference to the natal chart. So if you're looking at a solar return, you can put the natal planets around it and see what connections there are. And you can also, and should also, take the natal chart and put the solar return planets around it.
And yet, Anthony, I think often it clearly shows, like a solar return shows so clearly events, even if you don't even have to consider the natal horoscope. Of course, it's all derived from that, but
it was only when you compared the natal chart that you saw it wasn't as dangerous a situation as the solar return alone would indicate.
Absolutely. Of course.
Alone, your client would have died with the baby. If you put the natal chart around it, you would see that there was a lot of protection going on.
Oh, yes. Because I asked this lady and she said, there were serious complications, but, all was good in the end. The child is healthy and still is healthy, is a perfectly healthy child. She's perfectly healthy. It was my question. So that was one of the reasons why I got more interested in, looking at and verifying the events to the natal chart, because before I was not really focused on that, because I'm using it more as a confirmation technique. And when I'm looking at the Parashara, doing more the Parashara style of astrology, looking at the Vimshatri Dasha, but more importantly, like Gemini Dashas, which are very clearly showing. And then, I use it as a confirmation tool, and then it can really jump out. Okay, it's what I've been analyzing for the past 30 minutes with using these other systems. A Varshafal can jump out just in an instant. It's like it works, and so in that sense, it's a great system. But I think it's important to really examine that natal chart and see what the promise is really there. But then on the other hand, for example, we have George Bush's horoscope when he became president, at age 54. And then, his natal horoscope, if you could analyze the natal positions and, from the Tajika angle and auspicious is 2 planets, of course, there's some indications there, but it's not really clear at all, But then if you look at his Varshafal year, the year that he was running, it's just insane how powerful it really is, So it's, of course, if you look for the prominence or the potential in the natal horoscope, you also find it, but it's not that clear. It's not always that clear cut. So, for the same because how would you know, like here in the case that I presented, Mercury as the Varshapati Lord, the year Lord, was exalted in the horoscope, right, in the natal chart. So, and that's of course gonna tell you a lot, but often it's not gonna be like that. And so I think it's important to look at these important, when people ask for in these things, to look at the things from multiple angles and really invest in the charts. And I think as a modern astrologist, one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with sometimes is time, like Ken Rao says, like if you analyze a horoscope, really go into it like strongly and like with full devotion and really take your time for analyzing what the questions people ask you, but these days we have to make it really quick. And so I appreciate your, the example that you put forward, which seems like a very thorough way and showing several techniques to tackle a horoscope, which is right.
Even I come from the other school of thought where I cannot use a solar return chart without the natal chart, and it almost acts as a blind spot to me. But again, most of the modern astrologers are used to kind of using the solar return chart as a standalone chart. But to me, without the natal chart and the actual timing technique, whatever timing technique the astrologer uses, it becomes very difficult to me. So thank you so much, Levi and Anthony, for great insights. And now let's move to Rok and see what he has to say. Rok, do you have something to share?
Yeah, sure. We're going a little bit back now, into the past, from the modern medieval times, and now let's look at the most primitive form of solar return.
So even I have something to share, which I kind of wrote for my article, but I think I'll just put up the picture so we all can share some insights to that and see how. And I use solar returns from a more, it's I don't follow a specific technique. I use Mundala from Tajika, and I basically follow the sun's entry point as ascendant, but even though I don't take the ascendant lord as a main factor, and I use more of Hellenistic stuff. So let's see what you have to say here.
First of all, I would just like to say that I had, for a few years, like a love-hate relationship with solar returns. First, I learned them in the context of modern Western astrology, and I also read different opinions. Some astrologers were like swearing by them, and some said that they are utterly useless. And then I found the same idea, with Indian astrologers. Some say that what there's no use for solar returns, but in the meanwhile, I've been also studying Tajika system the same way as Levi, but I never went as deeply into it. And I just decided, okay, maybe just solar returns are not my cup of tea, until I discovered this, old primeval, so to say, way of doing it, as described by Dorotheus. And now somehow, solar returns have become fun to do for me. And I see that, finally, they are kind of working, but of course in conjunction with other techniques. And maybe here with this example that I will share, we can address this question, how the solar return is used with yearly perfections, because I have concentrated upon this. So I'll share my screen. Is it visible? Do you see the screen? The chart? Okay. So this is a horoscope of a female who has given birth to a female child in her 33rd year. So here the perfected ascendant comes to Sagittarius, which is marked here. So the year lord becomes Jupiter. And if we look at Jupiter, Jupiter is in the 4th house, conjunct the lot of fortune, and also conjunct the lot of daughter, which is the lot that's calculated from Jupiter, distance from Jupiter to Venus, and counted from the ascendant. So this is a very specific point of manifestation that's just that. It's the daughter. So we have, right away, we have, like quite a powerful indication that this might happen. Something will happen in relation to children, because Jupiter is also the natural significator of children. And we have in conjunct within 2 degrees, this the lot of daughter is at 14 degrees, Jupiter is at 16. So it's quite a tight conjunction. And also we have, of course, moon is always important, and the moon is the natal 5th lord, and it's applying to the ascendant. So here we have 2 indications that say, okay, children will be an important theme in this year. And the moon is also the predominator of the chart, because it's in the 11th house and the sun is cadent. And if we move forward, if we go from Jupiter and the lot of daughter, the ruler Mercury, we find Mercury in the 9th house having its return. And it's tightly conjunct with the North Node. So the North Node is, especially what I've learned from Indian astrology that deals more with the nodes, always kind of marks a new point in life, some very deep change in the path of the individual. And here we're dealing with the 9th house. The 9th house is, some would say, it's the 5th house from the 5th. And it's also, but I look more like, I consider it more like, okay, it's the God's house. Traditionally in Hellenistic astrology, this is the house of God. And it's connected to our innate nature, innate duty. What has God or the Creator put us here to do? How are we fulfilling our nature? And the basic nature, the basic duty, so to say, of a female is to give birth to a child. So that's why the 9th house is important for childbirths in female horoscopes. And yes, and if we proceed with Mercury having its return as the ruler of the lot of daughter, we see that it's in an exact trine with the solar return moon. And the moon, as the solar return planet, is in exact trine because we're dealing with a return with the natal Mercury. So what we have here is we have the 5th lord, the moon, connecting by trine to the ruler of the lot of daughter, and the 4th house and the fortune ruler. And also, if we just remove this a little bit, the moon is in the 11th house natally, and it's in a sextile to its natal position, which is affirming, what the moon is there to do. And the 11th house, I find, is also very important for children because, first of all, it's the 5th house from the 7th, so it denotes children of your spouse, but also the 11th house is the joy of Jupiter. Jupiter has the joy in the 11th house, and Jupiter is the significator of children. So I've also read that many astrologers have preferred the 11th house to be the house of children to the 5th, actually. But in any case, in this chart, we have both. The moon rules the 5th and the 11th, and it's applying to the ascendant. And by trine, it's connected both to the solar return Mercury and to the natal, to the radix Mercury by trine. So this is already quite illustrating it, that the topic of children will be very important during this year. But if we go back to our perfected, to the sign of perfected ascendant, to Sagittarius, we have Mars here. And it's always important to see which planet falls in the perfected sign. And Mars at first glance doesn't really speak very much. It doesn't rule any house related to children. It's a malefic. But it is, Mars does rule the sun, the sect-light. We have a day chart. So the sun is the light of the sect. And Mars is the ruler both by sign and by term, by bound of the sect-light. So it has importance, it has a say in the chart. And we can see that aspected by trine, the lot it rules. The lot of children is at 17 degrees of Aries, and Mars is at 14 degrees. So it's within 3 degrees aspect to its own lot. And furthermore, its opposition within exact degree to the lot of daughter. And we're dealing with the birth of the female. So here already, many things point towards children, children, children. And also because Mars is involved, the labor was a difficult one. And there was also a separation from the child, from the mother for 1 week. But it all went well, and the child was at the end, both of them were healthy. So this is in terms of a perfected ascendant, which is in Sagittarius, and the related aspects from the solar return chart to the natal chart. But I always also like to perfect the lot of fortune. Many times I find it even more effective. I wanted to mention Saturn, because Saturn is the ruler of the chart, oikodespotes, because it's the ruler of the moon, of the predominator. So it's also important to look at Saturn. And Saturn is in the return, it's conjunct the Sun in the 9th house. And natally it rules the 11th house, it rules the moon. So naturally, yeah, Saturn is also important here. And I would like to also point out that the sign of Capricorn, I keep seeing it connected to childbirths. And it kind of makes sense, because some are of the opinion that Cancer, while we usually consider Cancer to be the sign of motherhood, Cancer is cardinal water, so it's the primeval water, which is the water in the womb, where the physical form is taking shape. But Capricorn is cardinal earth, which is where the physical form enters this physical world. So I keep seeing it, yeah, because me and Levi were discussing childbirths quite intensely, and I've been doing research of predictive techniques through childbirths, and so far this combination of perfections and solar return is very promising, very revealing.
Sure.
And then if we go to the lot of fortune, which perfects to Pisces in this year. So Pisces is also it's the natal ascendant, and we have the solar return moon here. Again, it is emphasized, and by perfection of the lot of fortune, again Jupiter is the lord of the year. So Jupiter is activated both by perfecting ascendant and the lot of fortune. So the theme of delivering a child, of childbirth, a female chart, is quite clearly indicated by this chart.
Okay, so Anthony, do you want to add something to this?
In Sag, was it a natural childbirth, or was there a surgical intervention?
Oh no surgical.
It was surgical?
No.
It was not surgical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It took a long time, and but the rest was natural. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Levi, did you want to say something?
No, I think it was a really clear example.
Okay, I thought it was the same, because I think Anthony's was also really clear, and Rok was also really clear. So, and all our practical examples today, starting from you, was really clear from the outset itself. So, Rok, if you have to say something, I mean, if you don't have more, I think you can just stop the screen share. Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I just would like to emphasize that in my testing of these techniques, I keep seeing that the lots are very important when it comes to predicting concrete things, because you have a specific lot for a specific thing. You just have, okay, this is the point of children, point of daughter, of son, of mother, father. So I kind of give preference to the lots lately over the houses, actually. Okay. And I see this also in, you know, the early texts, that the lots are emphasized for topics, and the houses, you know, while they are carrying some significations, they are largely also used just to determine, you know, the condition of the planet. You know, if a planet falls in an active house, then yes, it's able to produce. If it falls in a inactive house, then it can't manifest its significations and so on. So yeah, this is something I'm really now putting into my practice, the use of the lots, and I see them really working.
Great. So I think I just have one chart, and we'll quickly finish it in another 5 to 10 minutes. And I'll just try and share my screen here. Every one of us can pitch in with. So is okay. Are we able to see here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the nativity of Hollywood star Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone has analyzed his Academy Award victory, I think in Feb 2016. But I think I just wanted to go back a year and see what kind of hardships was reflected in his annual return chart in the year 2015, because the movie was shot for the better part of 2015, and Leo signed this up, I think, in 2014. So the movie was shot in extreme conditions, like in like the temperature of the conditions were at minus 25 to 35, even minus 40 degrees Celsius. So extreme cold conditions in far west Canada and somewhere in top mountains of Argentina, as I read in the Google. So so we see here that I mean, people can kind of check out the natal chart here, but I'll quickly fall back to the solar return chart and see some comparisons with the natal chart. Aquarius, the 6th house, is the profected sign, and Saturn is the ruler of the year. So Saturn is the out of sect malefic, because this is the night chart, obviously. And those who don't know sect, I just assume that everyone knows sect. Sect is the differentiation factor of the day birth and the night birth. When sun is above the horizon, nativity is said to be a day chart, and when sun falls below the horizon, the nativity is said to be the night chart or the nocturnal chart. So here Saturn is the ruler of the year, and Saturn is an out of sect malefic. So an out of sect malefic planet makes conditions even more challenging than usual. And Mars is actually applying to a sextile aspect with Saturn, which I consider it to be a mitigating factor. But again, Saturn is a cold planet and Mars is a dry planet, and again, so Saturn and Mars together kind of indicate more rough conditions here. But still, the mitigating factor makes sure that no injury is actually life-threatening to the person. So I take it in this way. And the ruler of the solar return chart, the rising sign Lord Jupiter, is placed in the 6th house, which is again a very challenging placement. And 6th house is you know, the remuneration for work. I mean, salaried employment or something like that. And so here, Leo is an actor, and he gets remuneration for his acting skills and his performance. So this kind of, and Saturn is also a natural significator of profession. So somehow everything kind of falls in place as to indicating that the native is going to be in extremely tough, challenging, and cold conditions with regard to his profession. So Jupiter is the triplicity ruler, and I use Dorothy's triplicity lords, and Jupiter is the triplicity ruler, and Saturn directly indicates again cold conditions, and Saturn's transit position in Scorpio forms a whole sign aspect with the sign of Aquarius, which is the profected sign of the year. So again, we have. So does anyone want to say here something? No? Okay. So Jupiter in Leo also forms a whole sign aspect with Scorpio, and Scorpio is deep water sign, again indicating tough conditions. Yeah, so Scorpio is again a deep water sign and indicating tough conditions and cold conditions. And I don't necessarily remember the Vimshotri Dasha, but I think it was again a Rahu period. And so in the natal position of Rahu kind of gives a lot more indication as to what this native was going through. So sect-like moon is in conjunction with transit Mars, which indicates that the native would have been seriously injured multiple times during the shooting, and Mars is a natural malefic. So Mars, natural malefic with moon. Mars is an insect malefic. So we can kind of make sure that this is not going to hamper the production of the movie, and it's not going to cause loss to the producers, and the native can actually get back to work in time. So despite a lot of injuries, and Leo had to kind of get into water in real time when the external temperature was around -30 and -35, and Moon and Mars in Virgo kind of signifies such critical moments during the shoot that native had to undergo during such cold conditions. And Virgo is also an air sign, natal moon in that particular sign. So we all know how cold the conditions would have been when the external temperature was -30 and 35. So there is a lot of trouble that this chart is indicating, but I've written a lot more in my article, but I don't think I have a lot of time to kind of say here. So if anyone has much more to say, I think you are welcome.
I have to say, for me, it's a little bit difficult to read this.
Okay,
this type of chart. I'm just not used to it.
Okay, I understand. So I assume that it's also a bit difficult for the participant. Anthony, did you have to say something here?
Just one comment that there's a lot of opposition here. The natal ascendant opposes the return ascendant. The natal Jupiter opposes the return Jupiter, and that's the 6th to the 12th houses. Mm-hmm. So that alone would indicate a difficult year.
Sure. So and I recently wrote an article about Saturn and Mars and cold conditions, and I couldn't resist talking about Saturn, Mars, and Moon, and relating it with the cold conditions. So if any participants have something to ask, I think we are kind of closing in with our session here. Okay, so if any of you have final thoughts, Levi.
I think it's very interesting to see different perspectives and how these techniques all point to the same things. What's also clear, it's very, we have so many tools available to back engineer to backtrack an event and so on. And so it shows that the prediction is a very tedious and super complicated thing. So it's more it's how should I put it? I think it's great that all these people, we all devote ourselves to something that is very mysterious and very elusive in the same way. It can be very practical, and it can show so many things very clearly, but at the same time we're also grabbing in the dust. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic. And so, I was very honored to be here and meeting all these nice people, Anthony, Rok, and also Lars. And thank you, Aswin, for having me. And so, yeah, thanks.
Cool. So, any other ideas, Rok? So, did you want to say something, a final or something?
I would just like to thank you for organizing this, and it was also very nice to meet Mr. Anthony. You know, he's a legendary astrologer, so I'm kind of, you know, humbled to speak here in the same panel, and I would like to thank him also for sharing his knowledge with us, and also thank Levi for sharing his Varshapala techniques. Lars unfortunately had to go earlier. Yeah. And thank you also for sharing yours. I mean, it's always nice to share like this.
So I've never seen someone explain Firdaria. Thank you so much, Anthony, for doing that. And also the reversal, even I'm not really used to that thing. So thank you so much for, I mean, I think I first proposed this idea to Anthony, and then only after Anthony kind of accepted coming over, I asked everyone else. So I think that's where it started. So I think the discussion started with Anthony. I had the first solar revolutions discussions with Anthony. So again, thank you, Rok. Thank you, Levi. So Anthony, if you had some final thoughts, I think we can just wrap it up.
Okay, well, I'm also honored to be here. I don't feel legendary. I really feel I'm a student of astrology. I'm always learning something new. And it's great to be in a panel with such knowledgeable people. I always really find it interesting and useful. I think this was a great idea. My only thought was I was thinking about solar returns sort of philosophically, and this goes way back to Hellenistic times, that the birth chart really is the root. It's like our DNA, and the solar return just is one step in the process of its development. But the DNA is always what's important, the genes. Mm-hmm. And then the solar return just shows us what we're going through at that moment or in that year, but the genes really determine how we develop and how we unfold. The solar return just gives us a window into what the environment is like we're going through.
Okay, so this is probably the first of many webinars that might follow. And this is the first time for me also, I mean, kind of organizing something where I can bring in a lot of, summon various thoughts about a similar concept under one banner or one forum. So if there was any disorganized stuff that you found, the panelists or the participants, I think this is the first time, and I hope you'll forgive those and kind of move ahead and keep supporting us in our endeavors. So, I initially didn't have any idea of presenting a chart because I really wanted Rok, Levi, and Anthony and Lars to do something. But since, unfortunately, Lars had to move out, I had to pitch in with something at the last time. But I would consider doing a much more detailed discussion about Leo's chart that I did here as a separate YouTube video and share it in near future, so that I could cover a lot more things. So I had to run through because we had a stipulated schedule here, so which we had to keep up. And we already have some participants. And thank you so much, Anthony, Lars, Levi, and Rok. Even though we would have liked Lars to stay on, he had to go. For some unavoidable reasons. So thank you all the participants. Thank you everyone. And I hope we'll be back with something, interesting again and bring a collective forum and collective ideologies once again. Thank you everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Ciao.